All right, everyone, welcome to another session talking about sampling. This is not something that you will need in-house, but again, it's important for us to understand when you have the qualified assessor, right, coming in to assess your system and to ensure that you all stay in compliance with PCI DSS. At least when they come and they are also doing their sampling, it's important for you to at least understand what they do, right? And that's why I said sampling is a method used by assessor during PCI DSS assessments to test a representative subset of the population. It's just like sample. You don't know, some of you are in healthcare, if you're carrying research, you have to do your sample, right? Sampling to come out with your result. Rather than testing every single item in that environment, sampling helps simplify the process when dealing with large population of items, such as system logs and controls. Remember, all the system now we can be talking servers. The organization have 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 servers. Are you really going to do all of those 5,000? And the goal of sampling is to provide a reasonable assurance that controls are effective across the entire population without testing any or every single item. Then, our next slide, but we're going to cover some of the condition or acceptable condition for sampling. First, it says sampling is acceptable when there is a large population of similar items that need to be tested for PCI DSS. Similar item, maybe you group all Windows 10, and then you group all Windows 11, or you group, you understand, of similar item. And if you have a very large population of this item, then you can sample it. It's important that sample represent the entire population and are not just a small subset of critical items. You understand? Don't just go and focus on those critical items. That's why you have to get our population. Then maybe you start hearing word of random sampling, right? Say, for example, organization might have about 1,000 servers, and the PCI DSS require checking antivirus software. Testing each and every single server would definitely be time consuming. So they can just say, this one is, we are just saying, right? Say they choose to sample 10%, that, could be sample provided the sample is representative of the entire population. You see, so that 10% literally represent the entire population. Some PCI DSS requirement must also be applied to all items in an environment, not just the sample. Say, for example, do you see, must be applied to all items. For example, we talk of quarterly vulnerability scan. This applies to each and every system component and the CDE, cardholder data environment, and not just a subset of the system. So definitely PCI DSS also have requirements that are mandatory and apply to all the item or system that are being housed, that are part of the CDE, right? And because of that, assessor cannot sample PCI DSS requirement, right? In that situation that PCI DSS have put, you cannot sample, so you have to perform all the tests or assess everything. And he said that it is not acceptable to assess only a sample of the PCI DSS requirements. All aspects of the requirement must be reviewed to ensure compliance, right? And then let's talk of automated testing as well as sampling. For automated, definitely we know that we're going to use automated tools that allow assessors to test 100% of the population efficiently, requiring comprehensive coverage without manual testing. If you have a scan, you've already applied it for all your assets that are being housed in the or part of the CDE, so that is something that you're going to be scanned, everything will be definitely be scanned automatically, right? But when automated testing is not applicable then or available, then if automated testing mechanisms are not available, sampling then becomes an equally acceptable method of testing. So sampling now, remember, depending on the population size, then we can go with sampling if at all automated tools are not available. Say, for example, an organization using an automated vulnerability scan tool that check all servers in the network of vulnerabilities, right? The assessor can rely on the result of this automated tool to ensure compliance with the quarterly scan requirement. But how do you select representative sample? Remember, we said that if you are going with the 10% of the out of the 100%, then that actually stand as a representative sample. But how do you select that? First, it has to do with the scope and complexity of the environment. If the environment is complex, say for example, you have multiple types of server applications or even configurations, then the sample must cover all the variations, right? So that's why you have like complex and multiple different types, right? So we're not just gonna go, you know what, we have servers, we have applications, we have configuration, then we just do 10% of all of this. No. And that's why the sampling go by the different variation, right? Then automated versus manual controls. Automated processes can also allow for testing of the entire population, reducing the need for manual sampling, right? Say, if assessing anti-malware compliance, all servers in the population should be considered. Sampling could include selecting a variety of servers to ensure that anti-malware is applied consistently across all types. So, for example, a company has 500 servers, and the PCI DSS requirement is to ensure that anti-malware software is installed on all servers, right? First, the assessor select a sample of 10% of 50 servers, which include different types of servers, web servers, database servers, application servers, to verify that the anti-malware software is definitely installed correctly. So this sample will provide confidence that anti-malware is deployed across all servers, including those used for different functions. Then what about dividing population for specific configuration review? Say, for example, a company has different type of operating systems, Windows, Linux, name it, right? And PCI DSS requirement is to review the operating system configuration. What's the action? Instead of selecting a sample of all server, the assessor divides the population based on the operating system types, right? That's why you have Windows server, you have Linux server, and that's how you divide it before you can even get a sampling. And what's the reasoning for doing this? This ensures that the operating system configuration is compliant for each type of operating system in use, right? So ensuring sampling or ensuring the sample is representative. What will make a sample representative? First, a representative sample must include a variety of items that are representative of the entire population. For example, if an organization uses several operating systems and server types, the same must include all types, e.g. web server, application server, database server, and so on. When reviewing a sample of web server, the sample must include all versions of the web server software and different types of server within the populations. And then we also talk of sample size and variance, right? How do we determine sample size? It says that the sample size should be large enough to provide reasonable assurance that the controls are working as expected. For example, if the company has 1,000 servers running a specific operating system, the assessor should sample sufficient number of servers to ensure that the OS configuration is consistent across the entire population. Also, the sample must also include all variants of the population, right? For example, if there are web server, database servers, using the same operating system, both types of servers should be included in the sample to ensure comprehensive compliance. I think that's pretty much clear, right? Then what of testing periodic requirements? First, we said for requirements that are tested periodically, like weekly or quarterly, the assessor should also select a sample that represents the entire testing period to make a reasonable judgment that the requirement was met throughout the period, right? And for example, let's talk on quarterly vulnerability scan. So instead of testing just one scan in the quarter, do you get? The assessor might choose a sample of scan across the entire quarter to ensure consistent compliance throughout the period. This is really makes sense. And this gives us an example of the metrics that we discussed. The security metrics, if you have a dashboard, So you can see the unit appears and that using network security controls, and then, change detection pattern. Remember what we discussed, access control and the like. Then talking about sampling PCI DSS assessment, also further consideration as well as example. Say, for example, when I'm assessing access control, an assessor might choose a sample of administrators rather than a sample of all employees. Do you see? Why is this relevant? Because administrators typically have elevated access privileges or rights that make them critical, focus on security controls. And then talking about selection of system components. Say if an entity has different type of server, as we've discussed earlier, it could be web server, it could be database server. The assessor will sample server across various types, including all versions as well as configuration, right? And then based on the requirement, the type of requirement being assessed may influence the sample selection. Remember, we spoke on that already. If reviewing anti-malware software, the sample might include server running specific operating system or critical system where anti-malware is most important. Then what about professional judgment when you are selecting your sample? First, it says that professional judgment must be used throughout the planning, performance, as well as evaluation of the sample. And what's the goal? To obtain enough evidence to form a reasonable basis for assessor opinion on whether PCI DSS requirements have been met. An example, say if an organization has a small IT team, an assessor may select a larger sample of server or components to ensure they are adequately monitored, right? Conversely, if a company has a standardized process to managing anti-malware on all systems, the assessor might select a small sampling for testing. But what are some of those factors impacting sample selection? Assessor, we have complete population, where the assessor must select the sample from the complete population of the system or employees being reviewed without any influence from the organization being assessed, right? I'm just reading because these are just plain English and it's clear, right? Standardized processes. If an organization has standardized processes and controls, all servers follow the same configuration. The sample size can be smaller because it's easier to assume consistency. For example, all web servers follow the same firewall configuration, so testing just one server might be sufficient to verify compliance. And what are some of the factors affecting selection? We have a non-standardized process, which says that if the organization lacks standardized processes, the sample size must be larger. I think we spoke that, which makes sense. If they don't have a standardized processes, then you need to have a larger sample size to ensure that PCI DSS requirements are applied to each item in the population. A company has custom configuration for different servers, meaning that the assessor must sample a larger variety of systems to verify that all configuration meet PCI DSS requirements. Type of processes or component. For example, if assessing change management processes, the sample must include representative from each type of system. We spoke on that already, right? What of sampling from subpopulations? If different business units use different processes, different IT department, finance, HR, right? The population may be divided into subpopulations. Each subpopulation should also be sampled separately. A company with separate processes for data center and remote office should sample from each location to ensure consistency of PCI DSS compliance. And then talking about standardized, also if the entity applies standardized controls, we talk about non-standardized, right? The sample can be smaller. For non-standardized environment, the sample should be larger, which definitely makes sense. And then this just talk about some of the experiences we covered. For example, a company has 100 employees and the PCI DSS requirement verify the access control are implemented and functioning correctly. Instead of sampling all 100 employees, they might focus on the sample of administrators because they have elevated privileges, right? And the reason is that administrators are more likely to impact security of cardholder data. So ensuring the access are effective is even more critical, right? And also we spoke about this already about operating system having multiple operating systems, right? Assessor will also select sample from each operating system to ensure that controls are being implemented. For example, anti-malware patch management as well. And what's the reason? Different operating systems may require different configurations. So it's important to sample from each type of verifying compliance. And what about documentation? Assessor must document the rationale behind the sample size. You don't just do it like, no, I'm going to be doing and that's it. No, documentation is a big thing, right? And they said the number of system or employee being accessed, the nature of processes, the important or risk associated with the item being sampled. Okay, for example, if reviewing security control for critical system, the assessor may document that the sample include 10% of critical system focusing on high risk components. Also, even after doing that, you have to reevaluate, right? Reevaluate sampling decision each year. So assessor will definitely want to reevaluate their sampling approach for each assessment to ensure it accounts for any environmental changes with their new system, any update on their configurations. And for example, we said that if a new system are introduced, then assessor may need to increase the sample size, right? Because it might also have an impact, to data security. All right. And then takeaway on sampling, an effective tool for testing compliance, but requires professional judgment and careful planning. Sample must be representative and sufficiently large to ensure compliance is assessed across the entire publication or population. Also, make sure document the rationale for sample selection and size, ensure transparency and accountability in process. Automated testing, where available, can eliminate the need for sampling by testing the entire population. And this gives us the step and what organization needs to do at any given point in time. And that brings us to the end of sampling. That was just straightforward. Even time frames is also straightforward. Just something for us to know if assessors are coming in and depending on their type of sampling method they want to go with, you will at least have an idea. And if there's a change or your organization introduce like new system, if they have to change their sampling method, then the next fiscal year, then you definitely understand why they are doing so, right? Otherwise, see you on the next video and make sure you subscribe, like our video. All right, I'll see you on the next video. Bye.